Hello again, and welcome to Kingdom Tales. I'm Father Lee, and I'm going to continue as we read together from The Tales of the Kingdom by David and Karen Maines. Have you ever had a rule that somebody gave you that just didn't make any sense to you? It seemed like a silly rule, like somebody was just trying to tell you what to do and they didn't have a good reason for it. You may not know this, but I used to drive school buses. And the school that I worked for had a very specific rule, and it seemed silly to me. And it really seemed silly to most of the people who drove school buses. And it was when you were holding onto the steering wheel, if you had to turn, you had to move your hands in just this one specific way. And if you didn't, then the person who was teaching you would get very upset, and they would tell you, you have to do it just this way. Now, all of us thought that those were silly rules, that we didn't understand why they were there. Until one day, I was driving the school bus, and it was on a very narrow road in a very scary part of the country. And I had to turn the wheel very, very quickly in order to avoid a big truck that was coming the other direction. And because I had my hands on the steering wheel in just the right way, I was able to make sure that the bus stayed on the road and that it stayed safe. Because the rule wasn't there because somebody wanted to keep track of me. It wasn't there because somebody wanted to be in charge. It was there, like most rules, in order to keep me and the people around me safe. Today's story is a story about rules and about what happens when we leave them behind and the effect that it can have not just on us, but on all of the people who are around us. This is Princess Amanda and the Dragon. Once, tall grasses grew by Lake Marmo. Each spring, damsel dragons dropped out of the sky, trampled nests in the reeds, laid clutches of eggs, and buried them in the sand. And once they had given birth, the great reptiles flapped away. Dragons in the sky are the first sign of spring in Great Park. The children come baskets in hand, eager for dragon egg hunts. They shed their winter stockings and wiggle their bare toes in the warm sand. They race each other, laughing and breathless, to see who will reach a clutch of dragon eggs first. They yell and they hoot when they find the treasure. Dragon eggs, they cry. Soon the shout, dragon eggs, echoes back and forth from both sides of the lake. Children know they are forbidden to keep dragon eggs because a dragonet soon hatches from the egg and it achieves full growth 6 months later. The baby dragon's scales harden. It begins to breathe fire. At first, there are short blasts of warm air, then great searing torches of flame. The dragon has become cunning and cannot be trusted. So, a sign on the shore of Lake Marmo reads, "It is forbidden to keep dragon eggs." The 2 eggs Princess Amanda found one day, many months after Hero's arrival, were bronze. They glowed like amber jewels in the sunlight. Perhaps she meant to carry them to Caretaker. Perhaps she thought they were old and shriveled inside. Perhaps she forgot. But she did not take them to Caretaker's cottage. Instead, she hid the eggs. She hid them in my very own place. Her den in the hollow of a mighty oak at the edge of Outpost Meadow, which was so far from Stonegate entrance that few strangers ever walked to it. It was so peaceful here that Caretaker visited the area only a few times in his yearly rounds. The spring sun reached the floor of Amanda's den and warmed her hiding place. Soon one egg rattled when Princess Amanda picked it up to inspect it. Obviously, there was no life inside, but the other one began to crack. By mid-morning, a dragon hatchling pecked its way out and left the shell. The baby dragon squawked for food. Its long neck bobbed and weaved. Its head pattered back and forth. Its feet ran round and round, running to keep up with its huge head. It bumped into the side of the tree. Amanda laughed. "I must take you to Caretaker," she said aloud. "He'll know what to do about surprise hatchlings." The little beast turned its brown eye on her, and a great tear dropped onto its breast. Amanda began to love the baby dragon. Though she knew it was forbidden, she kept the hatchling as a pet. Just for a little while, she thought. Perhaps I can tame it. The princess fed the baby insects and wild roots. She kept it alive with hour-by-hour feedings, and because she nurtured the hatchling, she loved it all the more. The dragonet's bare skin soon became covered with soft scales, bronze and dazzling in the sun. That summer was filled with dragonet games. The little beast and Amanda set up relay races with butterflies. Lines of flittering wings, and one sweaty princess and one growing dragonet raced through Outpost Meadow. Other days Amanda and the animal bounded over the meadow buttercups, seeing who could take the longest leap. And soon the dragonet won every time. Sometimes Amanda tossed her ball as high as her arm could throw, and the dragonet would spring almost to the top of the trees and grab it in his jaws. "I have perfect aim, he has perfect catch, we must be a perfect match," she sang as they played in the sun. By the middle of summer, the dragonet was large enough for Amanda to wedge herself between the spikes on its back. Together, they leaped above the meadows, flying in and out of the limbs and the leaves of the old trees. The dragonet let out a joyous "Creer!" and Amanda laughed with glee. Up and down they soared, up high into the tree branches and down low into the flowering meadow. Amanda hung on for her life while the dragonet flew, flapping its wings. Amanda soon discovered that her pet hated to be left by itself. It wailed piteously when she left it to perfect her aim on practice field. And so she began to practice less and less. The dragonet particularly hated to be left alone at night, since the princess dared not bring it to inmost circle, and even feared for its life should it be discovered. She began to stay away from the great celebrations. One night, she crawled into her den beside the beast, and he licked her face and hands. Gratefully, it stretched out beside her, panting with relief that she had stayed. She could hear the distant music from deepest forest, and missed her friends. Raising a hatchling was more demanding than she had thought. Amanda became angry at the law that kept her from sharing her pet with others. What harm is one small dragon, she thought. That same night, she noticed a yellow gleam flickering in the beast's eyes as it looked at her. When it licked her face, she could feel that its breath was warm and dry. After that, when Amanda returned from short trips to forage for their food, she would find the walls of her den scorched. The hollow was becoming more blackened. It smelled of charcoal. The dragon was always glad to see her, but she was careful not to stand directly in front of its nose and mouth. More and more often, she had to be careful of its tail. A fully grown dragon's tail is deadly. One powerful sweep can move boulders or knock down medium-sized trees or cripple a man or kill a princess. Once, when she wanted to leap onto its back for a ride, the dragon leaped up without her. Creer, creer! Its cry became defiant as it shot a flame in her direction. For the first time, it had willfully disobeyed her. As each week passed, Amanda began to laugh less and less. One day, after racing the dragon through the forest, she left it napping in a sunny glade and returned to the hollow tree just as Caretaker was backing out of it. His sapling hat pulled out of the hole like a cork out of a bottle. "What's wrong with the inside of my very own place?" he asked. "Amanda, you haven't been lighting fires, have you?" "Oh, it's been that way a long time," she lied. I don't know what caused it. Maybe burners were here last winter." Amanda wished Caretaker would stop wearing that ridiculous tree for a hat. How could she have ever thought that it was so wonderful? Caretaker stared at the dirt in front of the den. He pushed at it with his foot. "Ever see any dragons around here?" he asked quietly. "Dragons?" answered Amanda quickly. "Not now. Season for dragons is over." Caretaker didn't say a word, but began to walk down Meadow Path. Old fool, thought Amanda. It was then that he stopped and turned and looked at her sadly. "If you ever need me, Amanda, just call." Caretaker gazed at Amanda for several long moments, and then turned around again and went on his way. The next day, she hid the dragon in another part of the forest. When she returned, it was Mercy who sat outside of her den. "She's the ugliest woman I've ever seen," thought Amanda with surprise. She dreaded talking to her. Why don't they just leave me alone? "Amanda," Mercy called with a sad smile. "I saw you coming before I heard you. What has happened to your laugh?" Amanda did not know how to answer. Had she changed? Everything looked different now. Was she losing her gift of seeing, or were things just appearing now as they really were? Maybe the great celebration was just a bunch of foolishness. That same night, Amanda realized that the scales of the dragon sleeping beside her were very hard. She knew that its big body was crowding my very own place, and that grown dragons were no laughing matter. This was the last night she would allow the dragon to return from its hiding place to sleep with her in the den. The next day, she took it deep into the forest and commanded it to stay. Secretly, she hoped the beast would fly away. It had become too big, and Princess Amanda was afraid. Somehow she had to get rid of the dragon. Trouble was ahead. She could feel it. One morning, a few days later, she woke early. With her eyes still closed, she enjoyed the comfort of having room to stretch. It was a crisp fall day. She could smell the cool, dry air, and she could smell fire. Amanda leaped to her feet. Fallen leaves had been pushed into a pile beside her hollow tree door, and they were burning. Amanda rushed out, stomping and scattering it. Her bare feet felt singed. Looking up, she could see that an old stump was smoldering beside Meadow Path. Underbrush was smoking on the edge of the forest. Amanda could see something large and bronze-colored moving between the trees. She dashed in to put her shoes on and rushed back out. "Wait! Wait!" She stopped. She began running down the path. "Wait! Wait for me!" She was terrified that the dry grass would catch and begin to flame from the dragon's breath. In her mind, she could see the whole forest burning, creatures running, and oh, how awful. Fire in Great Park. Fire because of her. Suddenly, she knew great harm could come from one small tame dragon. Small tame things grow into big wild beasts. Where, oh where was Caretaker now? Why had she not taken the hatchling to him right away? Why had she lied? The beast finally heard her call. It stepped out of the line of trees into the meadow to face her. Amanda gasped. It had grown even more, and she had not noticed how much. The huge beast sat waiting for her. Its long tail swept slowly across the ground behind it, and then flicked, and then swept back. The claws on one paw flexed, tearing the thatch and the soil beneath it, then opened, then flexed again. A thin, wet trickle dripped out of its mouth, down its jaw. Yellow light gleamed in its eyes. The dragon had become cunning. Why had she not seen this? Amanda drew herself to full stature. She ignored the throbbing in her feet. "Dragon!" she announced in her most majestic tone. "You must go. You are too big for my den. Grown dragons are not allowed in Great Park. Your breath is too hot. Fly away!" The dragon leered at her. It hunched like a cat on the prowl and moved closer and closer to her. Finally, the huge beast was near. It swept its tail, which quickly covered the distance between them. Amanda hopped over the tip. The dragon swept the long, jagged tail back faster. She hopped again. It raised its head and blew hot flames onto the grass behind her. She could hear the vegetation crackling. She could feel it begin to burn. She turned and stamped the fire out. The dragon breathed again. More fire. Her heart filled with terror. One small princess cannot put out all the fires this one large dragon starts. The dragon breathed again. The flames licked her clothes, her hair. She slapped at the fire with her hands. She rolled on the ground. She could see the great beast inching closer, flicking its tail, the yellow light growing brighter in its eyes. Amanda backed away. She knew it was useless to run. The dragon had always won the races. "Help!" she cried. "Caretaker! Caretaker! I'm too small for this terrible dragon. Help!" Suddenly, she scarcely knew how, Caretaker was standing beside her. He must have come bounding the moment the flames had begun. "Kill it! Kill it!" she screamed. The great beast began to lurch. It raised itself on its hind legs and roared. Flying flames filled the air. "No, Amanda," said the old man. "I cannot kill this dragon. Only one who loves a forbidden thing can do the slaying. You will always hate me if I do it. Only you can slay this dragon." Caretaker pulled out his woodsman's hatchet from the silver belt around his waist. He held it erect before him. He lifted his eyes to the sky. "In the name of the king, Amanda, for the restoration, you must slay the dragon." Caretaker tossed the hatchet directly overhead. It flew high, then started to tumble down end over end. And the humming began, the singing the princess had always loved. The hatchet landed at her feet. Its blade stuck firmly into the ground. Amanda reached down and gripped the wood. She felt the hatchet's power as she pulled it from the soil. By this time, Amanda had backed almost to the middle of Outpost Meadow, and Caretaker had moved out of the circle of mortal combat. Small fires were burning here and there on the grass. The princess must do this work quickly. She would only have one chance. Suddenly, Amanda had a terrible thought. Her laughter was gone. Her seeing had disappeared. What if the gift of perfect aim had vanished as well? The dragon was very close. She kept an eye on its tail. Though she had kept the beast alive, she knew it wanted to tear and devour her. The tail moved. Amanda leaped over it. It swept back. This time, Amanda was ready. She whacked the huge tail with her hatchet. A long piece wiggled on the ground, oozing green dragon blood. Perhaps there is hope, Amanda thought. That was pretty quick aim. The dragon made a terrible, terrible creel, creel, creel. Not so much from pain as from rage. It reared back on its hind legs, opened its mouth, and let out a fiery blast that caught Amanda full in the face. She could feel the hot flames licking her hair and her clothes. "Now, Amanda!" called Caretaker. "Now or never!" She took careful aim, raised the hatchet, sighted the bare white patch on the breast of the weaving dragon, which was its only vulnerable spot. "For the king!" she screamed. "For the restoration!" Strength filled her arm, and she let the hatchet fly. At that same moment, the beast roared again. It caught Amanda's leg with the bleeding stump of its swishing tail. She went down onto the grass. But Amanda's aim was true. Caretaker's hatchet hit its mark, and the great dragon came crashing down upon the little girl. Green ooze splashed over Outpost Meadow and covered the princess. "I'm dying," she thought. "I'll smother under the dragon's heavy body." Amanda felt Caretaker's hand touch her arm. Slowly, ever so slowly, the old man raised the edge of the great dragon hulk, just enough so that the old man could help Amanda inch her way along the ground to freedom. And then Caretaker cradled the child in his arms in the middle of Outpost Meadow and wept. Amanda's hair and eyebrows and lashes were burned into crinkles. Her clothes were charred. Her face and feet were all blisters and boils and soot. She was covered with dragon's blood. She looked like an outcast. But the Princess Amanda had won the battle. She had slain the dragon she loved. So the princess discovered that when one loves a forbidden thing, one loses what one loves most. This truth is a hard-won battle for each who finds it, and is always gained by loss.